Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 12. We're continuing with chapter 5. The chapter is titled Changing the Way We Teach, and we're now in the section How Can I Overcome the Challenges of Change? For many people, new way of teaching represents a major departure from current practice, and that means making big changes. And the textbook author sees two key challenges: accepting the risk of doing something new and maintaining a positive self-image throughout the change process. So, I've kind of been reflecting upon this the past 24 hours or so. Yesterday, I had to do an 8-hour class, and it was tough for the students because it was some makeup time, and because we're doing a curricular change, things got moved around. And what was difficult is this class, I normally teach 1 day a week for 2 hours at a time. So this is kind of an oddball thing by doing it an 8-day or an 8-hour day. But within that, there were times where I struggled, like, gosh, is the student lack of interest that they're expressing because they're fatigued from the long day, or could I be doing something better to engage learning, doing something differently actively? And that's kind of a tough one. And you're going to have these experiences where it's going to feel like the best way, the easiest way, the right way to do things is just to lecture on a topic. And other times you're going to be like, gosh, this is really just, I don't know if this is the best way of doing it, just kind of lecturing. Can the students learn differently? And it's hard because sometimes you feel like there's information that needs to be shared, but what is the best way of doing that? So now Fink goes on to describe the following. Following the suggestions presented in this book sometimes generates a great deal of anxiety and uncertainty. Do I really know how to do this? Will it work? What if it fails? You're going to feel that way. And all innovation inherently carries risk, and taking risks is scary. But avoiding any innovation condemns one to stagnation, which leads to an inability to improve and grow professionally as a teacher. To improve requires trying new ways of teaching, that is, being innovative. The solution to this dilemma is being deliberate about the type of innovation and about the level of risk you are willing to accept. Size up your political situation. Are you tenured or not? And your own psychological capabilities. So how much risk are you willing to handle? And from this, first decide how much risk you can afford to take. Then, based on that information, decide what amount and what kinds of innovation offer the prospect of significant improvement in the quantity and quality of your students' learning without exceeding your acceptable level of risk. So shown here, figure 5.1, risk and innovation. That's what's illustrated here. At any given moment, everyone is always at the far left hand of the diagram, but we're always faced with the question of how much change and how much risk are we willing to accept in order to grow and to improve. So a couple educator researchers going back to 1991 identified risk as perhaps the greatest of all barriers confronting teachers who want to use more active learning. They noted that there are two types of risk involved: how students will react to new ways of learning and how the faculty member will feel about the new ways of teaching. One of those things I faced yesterday. For 2 years, we've been teaching our students to become experts in their field, and that people are coming to them for their expertise. And yesterday, I was presenting coaching, health coaching. And if you're familiar with health coaching at all, you don't need to be an expert in almost anything. You are trying to work with the client to facilitate his or her goals. They've got the goals. And so by utilizing motivational interviewing, you try to come up with steps. So the client may be like, yeah, I'd like to eat better. Okay, what's that look like? You're not telling them what to do. but you're getting them to figure out what kind of small steps that they want to make. And if those goals are smart goals, if they're achievable, if they're realistic, et cetera, then you are going to potentially have success, right? If somebody is eating what you might consider poorly, and then, you know, can they make a 180 turnaround? Most people probably can't. But if you make those small steps, those goals can then be supported over time. Anyways, as I was teaching the students this, I think it was very difficult for them. And so I felt kind of resistance in that. So there are risks, and there are 3 strategies for lowering the risk when trying new ways of teaching. Choose a lower risk learning activity. For example, taking a periodic pause during a lecture to have students do something in pairs is less risky than having students do a role play. Choose an activity that involves less in-class time. Shorter activities are less risky than longer activities. Structure the activity carefully. If you can think ahead and anticipate possible directions the activity might go, then put parameters or boundaries around it so that it will probably go where you want to go and thus be less risky. A second requirement for those trying to improve their teaching is the recognition that what they really need is not to make a change, but to continually change. Doing this involves major restructuring in how you think about teaching and yourself as a teacher. So, one idea from Robert Keegan about multiple orders of consciousness that have relevance here. He postulates 5 orders of consciousness, 3 of which are reached by adults in varying proportions. In the third order, people interpret and create life experiences based on inferences about what they should do, with the should coming from various sources of authority: parents, the law, social identity, and so on. People who reach the 4th level of consciousness, not the majority of adults according to Keegan, engage in self-authorship, creating meaning in life according to their own self of purpose, or their own sense of self. But there exists another, a 5th level of consciousness, in which people find multiplicity in their own and in others' sense of self. These people author or create not just their self, but changes in it. That is, they consciously and deliberately engage in continual self-transformation. It's interesting to apply these ideas to the challenge of deciding how to teach. So, Fink indicates that most new college teachers begin their teaching careers by following the lead of teachers they had as students. They emulate the teachers they admired and do the opposite of teachers they disliked. So Fink thinks of that as third order consciousness. Now, these teachers find their own style after a few years based on their own experience and a clear sense of what kind of teacher they themselves want to be. This is closer to the 4th order of consciousness. But people who are ready for the 5th order of consciousness recognize that they need to continually learn new ways of teaching, which means continually making small changes and periodically making major changes. Is that feasible? Do teachers really do this? And according to Fink, teachers do this. Some dramatic examples of this come from a book on team-based learning, cited there. In a couple of the chapters in that book, teachers described why they had changed the way they taught, even though they previously had personal styles of teaching that were both excellent and mature. These were people who had won teaching awards, generally based on their excellence as lecturers. This was a comfortable way of teaching, and students obviously admired them because they gave their professors high ratings. But eventually, these teachers became uneasy about their perceptions of low-quality student learning. Even though their teaching was called good, student learning was not good. As a result, they began looking for ideas on what they might do differently. When these particular teachers encountered what they took to be a powerful new idea about teaching, they decided to try it. They were well aware of the high risk involved in giving up a familiar way of teaching that in one sense was still working quite well. At the outset, they were not sure how the students would react to this new strategy. So I'll give you an example from my practice. Last year in my pathophysiology class, I had a flipped classroom setup where I had students listen to maybe a 20-minute lecture on a screencast prior to coming to class, and then they were to sit and work in teams to try to figure out the diagnosis based upon the case presentation. So I had basically some similar diagnoses, things that had similar features to them. So let's say we were talking about the heart, there might be some things that had similar features in that, and then they were to work through that to come up with a answer or answers to the questions. And my goal with that was for them to also access the literature while in class and to really work through problems and try to answer things on their own versus me just telling them everything. And then we were going to debrief afterwards to discuss the cases. Well, I don't know that it was that successful. And the reason I don't think it was that successful is because the students didn't participate. Meaning, when it came time to work in the large group, nobody was willing to kind of talk about what they came up with. And so, a couple things from that. And that what's kind of funny is that was last year, and that was the same group that I was working with just yesterday. It's a group that a lot of us are struggling with their overall participation. But what I had to then do is realize, okay, maybe students aren't always going to be outright, even if you've got a team leader within a group, they just weren't coming out and talking. Like, okay, I would say group one, tell me what you got, and no one would speak up. So I've had to kind of change things, and it's been a little bit more successful this year. I've done kind of the same thing, but this time I have called upon groups and called upon people in those groups. It's not the way I wanted to do things to kind of put people on the spot. I wanted things to occur more organically and people expressing their or volunteering their participation. So now here is a case study for change, and what I'm going to do is let you read through it. So I'm going to give about 5 or so seconds of dead air, and when I say pause the recording, that's your chance to pause the recording and read through the slide. So go ahead and pause the recording now, and do the same thing. Pause the recording now, and continuing on, pause the recording now, and same thing, we're continuing on, pause the recording, and the case report continues. Pause the recording, continuing on with the case report, read on, pause the recording. Here is that exhibit 5.4. Read through it if you're interested. Just otherwise, note the goals, feedback and assessment, and teaching and learning activities. Don't worry so much about the components. Exhibit 5.4 continuing. And read through this portion of the case report. Case report's continuing on. Still continuing, pause the recording. Continuing on, pause the recording. Continuing on. And we're continuing on here. Pause the recording. Still continuing on with this case report. Same thing, continuing on. Pause the recording. Okay, so I know that was a lot there, and whether you read it through it or not, that's up to you. It's a case report example. Let me give an example now of something I've had my students do. So I teach a health and wellness class, and in the past, I've had students create health and wellness videos. People, the younger adults are really into social media, and so with health and wellness, trying to figure out ways that physical therapists can have an impact, that they can illustrate their knowledge and market to the community and provide education and services. So I did those things in the past where they would make these little health and wellness videos no more than 10 minutes long. Some of those are great, but you know, we just really didn't get much traction on our YouTube page. And what was funny, what I thought would really help it is students, you know, linking to it with their own websites, but they never really did that through whether it was Twitter or Facebook or things like that. So it never really took off. But I think it was a good way for them to kind of learn and take on a topic of interest of their own. So I would not give them a specific topic, but would help kind of guide them with their ideas. I've created something different now for students to do. And in the health and wellness class, one thing, maybe you've noticed this too, when you're on YouTube or probably any social media site, if you click on something and it's, you got a health thing and you're like, okay, hey, I'm curious about the health benefits of cold immersion. And then all of a sudden you get bombarded with everybody that's ever done a cold immersion video. So is cold immersion beneficial? I don't know. They say that it helps people lose fat. Well, you hear this and you're like, okay, would that be something beneficial for patients? If they are interested in losing weight, does cold immersion do that, taking cold baths? And another one was it helps with inflammation, taking cold baths. Well, I found research that suggested that cold immersion was no better at helping post-exercise inflammation than other active recovery modes. So the goal for the students is to find some claim on some social media site and then to create their own video about that claim, find research that either supports or refutes it, and make about a 4-minute video. And then I have them upload it because there's so much stuff, I want to get them learning about the process of discovery, of being critical. There's so much stuff, you can't know it all, but you can learn how to filter or to critique. So here's an example of that.
Hi, and welcome to this presentation in health and wellness about banana and sleep quality. The claim was made the 10th of January 2024 by this profile, Epsi Ewok. And they claimed that 2 bananas per day had several health benefits, including improved sleep quality, among others. Behind the Instagram profile, you'll find an online superfood store based in the US, but it's unknown who owns the profile of the shop. So for methods, I used Google, and a search was performed there using the browser's search field and including the keywords banana, sleep quality, research, and RCT. All words were combined by the Boolean operator AND. A single article from the Google search would be used to analyze the claim and ultimately refute or confirm the claim made by UMSAz. So, the fifth article appearing in the Google search was the randomized trial from January 2021 in Journal of Medical and Allied Sciences, as you see here. And the title, The Effect of Banana, Dose and Duration on the Decrease of Sleep Disorders in the Elderly. The article is an experimental trial with pre and post tests, including a control group. 63 individuals aged 60 or above were randomly recruited from the area of an Indonesian clinic. After exclusion, where the exclusion criteria were diabetes, antidepressants, and steroids, 62 individuals gave consent to participate and were divided into a control group receiving nutritional education, or between two experimental groups. Group 1 had 130 grams of banana daily for 14 days, whereas the Group 2 had 260 grams of banana per day for 14 days. The experimental groups, they also had nutritional education. Bananas, they were given twice per day, 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., and individuals were analyzed on day 0, 7, and 14 via the Insomnia Rating Scale Index, which gave 0 to 25 points, with higher scores leading to sleep disorders. For statistical purposes, a one-way ANOVA was used to measure the effect of the groups, and individuals, they have no significant differences from start. And they had a span in sleep from normal to severe insomnia. That is represented by this table here. The results, they showed a significant change towards more normalized sleep within groups. As you can see here, this is group 1 with significant results with p 0.005. Also for group 2, but also in between groups on day 7 and day 14, there were significant results. The study by Panorivanti et al. Was limited as there was no measures of serotonin or melatonin levels pre and post intervention, as these are the two main hormones related to sleep and thereby also related to sleep disorders in their lacking presence. Further, the authors discuss a limitation in the timing and administration of the bananas, as banana administered only at the end of the day may have improved sleep and sleep quality even further. The study strengths were not discussed, merely included in the use of banana instead of other fruits, as banana was has a high amount of tryptophan and melatonin and is related to sleep. Discussion. My discussion. The study did find significant correlation between the intake of banana and sleep quality measured through insomnia disorders in elderly Indonesians. However, due to the study design with no reports of blinding, randomization, or any controlling of confounders, the results and the evidence may be interpreted with scars, but suggest a support and confirmation of the claim made by UMSAz profile on Instagram, and even that the amount of 2 bananas are better than only eating 1. Thank you.
All right, so just kind of hopefully it's something that the students like doing, and hopefully it's something that gets them thinking, because there is a lot of craziness out there. And there's recent research that's come out that says that niacin may be unhealthy for people. It may cause vascular inflammation. Well, niacin has been something that has been used in the past to help raise HDL levels and lower LDL levels. And so you would think of niacin with a flush as having a positive impact, but new research suggests that may not be the case. So what happens though is those videos stay up on YouTube. They don't go down when new research comes out. And so just trying to get the students to look at a claim, create a learning artifact, create that learning product, and develop their critiquing skills. So this is continuing on with that case report here. And again, these continue on with it. If you want to read through these, you can do so. We're going to move on now. So the students, again, with John's class were appreciative. They were had expressed good learning. So now some lessons learned on how to change. Dialogue is important, talking with other faculty members and being open to change. Looking at your primary components of course design. And I really like to think about the majority of our courses in PT and OT as courses that should have active learning, doing things. Sometimes some classes don't have that, but the more that you can have doing things, the better. The willingness to start without a fully refined design. So this is John and Fink here, again, continuing on with the case, talking about how they worked with a template and then built out from there. The need for sustained effort in searching, monitoring the course, the progression of it. And again, this is all kind of the same case report stuff, so I'll let you read through these. Go ahead and pause the recording. Keep reading through. So given the challenge of implementing all the changes necessary to promote significant learning, will it really make a difference after all? Will my class really be substantially different and better? Will students actually get more engaged and learn better, or will the results look pretty much like they always happen that way? Business as usual. And on one hand, as your students take the National Occupational Therapy licensure exam, I mean, that's feedback that says, yeah, they were successful. I guess a challenge to you will be, how well do they do in practical type of situations? And how well can you develop them as professionals? Right now, with this current cohort of students, I don't know that we are developing them as professionals as well as I'd like them to be developed. Maybe it's because they're a particular generation and I'm much older and I'm looking at them with a different set of eyes, and different generations are different along those lines. But the fact that they're gonna be in a few months basically gone from us and working in clinics, they don't feel ready to me. And so you might have that feeling about students. That would be another thing to be like, how well can you work on refining them, making them, turning them into professionals? Here's another case study again, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll through it, give about 5 seconds of dead air, and you can read through it on your own. Okay, so what these different cases have shown is people attempting to make changes and struggle through the challenges that are associated with making those changes, and kind of the process of doing so. And as Fink was talking about those levels of teaching, with one level being that you're doing what you've seen other people do, that's very common. And for me, it has been doing both the sage from the stage, and it's also been trying to do active learning, lots of lab types of stuff. trying to do case examples, and then bring in problem-based learning. That is going to be, I think, where you find yourself doing a lot of work. Now, obviously, I don't know OTD curriculum at all. Some classes you probably have a lot of active learning, lab type of stuff, physical skills. What do you do in the classes that don't have that? What are the different learning things that can occur? So I think that's kind of your challenge. We see some examples here from these undergrad things on how the courses were designed in order to try to facilitate learning, but what can you do?